In this video, I'm going to explore the chorus and phaser effects and look at what the relationship is and how they differ. So in Zebra 2, there's a special effect module that allows us to use the phaser and chorus effect, and it's called Mod Effects 1 or Mod Effects 2. So both of these, and those stand for modulation effects. So if I select Mod Effects 1, I get a panel over here, and by default it's set for chorus. And I've got the initialize patch loaded. Okay, so let me disable this. And behind here, I'm just holding an A1 note down. Okay, so without the effect, it sounds like this. And then what we're going to be doing is looking at how changes to these different controls affect the waveform shape and also affect the spectrum. And then by doing that, I think we'll gain a good understanding of what effect these effects are having on the sound. So let me go ahead and enable this. And for chorus, I'm going to go ahead and bring the mix. The mix controls what you would expect. This is the dry versus wet. So at 0, we have no effect occurring. So if I play this, okay, we see the standard saw wave shape taking place with the harmonics. Now, if I bring the mix up, we start to see variations between the left and right channel, the blue and the green lines. And what's happening is the modulation that's occurring due to that chorus effect and the phase changes that are taking place between the two channels. And we can see the harmonic structure differing between the left and right channels in the spectrum analyzer because we see the presence of both green and blue peaks in the spectrum here. So they're slightly different. And those minute changes are responsible for the sound that we hear as a result of this chorus effect. So let me continue increasing the mix. So now that's 100% wet, so all we are hearing is the output of the chorus. We're not hearing any of the original dry signal. Now for the rest of the demonstration, what I want to do is I'm going to decrease this to about 80%. So I'm going to set it to 80. In fact, I'll do that with everything running. Okay, so we can see that we've got some of the original waveform in there, but then there's also this spike. Okay, in fact, let me decrease the mix a bit more. I think it'll be better to explain. I'll start with 50% here, so it's a 50-50 mix. You can see that the chorus effect has added the spike portion here as a result of the phase differences between the left and right channels and that LFO modulation. You can see the LFO modulation is responsible for the phase of each left and right channel cycling back and forth between 2 points. So let me demonstrate that. You see how these are going back and forth like this? That's a result of the low frequency oscillator that's inside this modulation effects unit, and that's responsible for that movement. Now we can control the speed of that with the speed control. So if I slow this down, I could go all the way to 0, and it's very slow now. Or if I speed it up, okay, and you might be wondering, well, what is depth? Well, depth controls how far apart in phase these two waves move, or the left and right channels move. So let me demonstrate that by increasing the depth parameter. So now they're moving farther apart from one another, and we hear a more pronounced chorus effect. Okay, next, now the question is, well, what does the center control do? Okay, well, let me increase the mix because it'll make it easier to see what the center control is doing. In fact, I need to decrease, let me decrease the depth and decrease the speed as well. And we'll zoom in a little bit on the spectrum analyzer. It's kind of hard to see with the chorus effect. It'll be easier to see what center is doing when we go to the phaser effect. But what it basically amounts to is internally it's controlling obviously the function of the chorus effect, but effectively the way I view it based on looking at the spectrum analyzer is it's the center frequency around which that modulation occurs. So let me switch to the phaser effect and I'll demonstrate that. So you can kind of see this differences here between the two green and the blue graphs, right? And you can kind of see this, well, this tooltip's in the way, but you can kind of see that there's a little, looks like a little resonance on either side, and then a little notched out area, and it keeps moving back and forth. Okay. Now we can make that more pronounced using the feedback control. I'll just bump it up just a little bit, and this is just to demonstrate, I'm just trying to demonstrate what the center does, okay? But this helps us visualize it a little more. So if I move center down, now the location of the modulation in terms of frequency is much lower than where it was before, right? Because we've got the two resonances here, and it looks like it's basically centered right around here. Actually, you could just look at these peaks. If I bump that up, increasing the center, now we can see the green peak and the left peak, or the green peak and the blue peak, or the left and right channels. And they seem to be centered around this location, their modulation, right around 700 Hertz. If I continue to increase center, now that modulation in terms of frequency has moved up to around 1400 Hertz. Okay? So that gives you an idea of what center does in terms of frequency. And if I switch back to chorus, it's not as easy to see what effect that's having. And it may be different for chorus. But it's easier to see the effect that center has for chorus if we look at the waveform. So I'm going to bring the mix back down to 50. reset these to their default values. And notice the location of the spike in terms of the beginning of the wave cycle, between the beginning and the end of the wave cycle. Okay, remember this is a saw wave, so if I bring mix all the way down to 0, we see the saw waveform. If I bring mix up, we see that spike as a result of the chorus effect being mixed in. Watch what happens to the location of that spike as I move the center. So I'm going to bring center all the way down to 0. And now I'm going to increase center. So that the spike has moved along the wave cycle in effect. So if I bring center back to 50, then that spike ends up being roughly in the middle of the wave cycle, a little bit to the left. And again, this is all just to understand sort of what effect it's having in terms of the sound as we listen to it, but also the shape of the waveform, how it's affecting that, and the spectrum and how it's affecting the spectrum. And by having all three, seeing all three and hearing how it sounds, seeing the spectrum and seeing the waveform shape, having all that occur at the same time and getting that information at the same time, I think can help really cement the concept of what this effect is doing in practical terms, which will then allow you to apply it when you're doing your sound design. Alright, the other thing to look at is feedback. If we use feedback, we can actually get sort of like a flanger type effect. It doesn't sound, strictly speaking, it's not flanger, but it sounds similar. And if we do it with phaser, and you can have negative feedback too. And try that again with chorus. Finally, the stereo. If we look at stereo, what effect that has. So at 0, there's very little separation between the left and right. .50 seems to be the maximum separation, and then at 100 it seems that they start to converge again. Okay, and then finally this quad. This is just another chorus effect that's added internally. So it's a second chorus, and that can just help thicken up that effect. And this Q phase is basically an offset for the LFO that's driving the second chorus. It's an offset from, I presume, these values here that are driving the first chorus LFO. Now, from a practical perspective, if we look at the EQ settings down here, let's say we wanted a chorus effect on a bass. And one thing we want to try to do though with that is to keep the fundamentals solid. So let me see if I can set up a situation where we can use this EQ. Okay, you see this fundamental here? Right now it's being affected by that chorus effect, because you can see that the left and right channels are modulating in phase against one another, okay, in frequency at the fundamental. Alright, to help make it more solid on the low end and keep it centered, what we can do is increase this high pass filter here. And now we can see this is much more stable, but we still have the chorus effect higher up in higher frequencies. So I could continue up if I wanted these two harmonics to be fairly solid and unaffected by the chorus, or least affected by the chorus. So that's how you would use that and why you would use that. Maybe give it a boost. And then on the flip side, on the other side, you might want to roll off some of this high-end chorus effect so you can bring the high frequencies down. So that's just how you would use that. Only other thing to talk about with this effect, and it's kind of more of a Zebra 2 feature, is you can blend chorus and phaser together in what they call sort of a force effect. But what I've found is that it doesn't, at least to my ear, I can't tell much of a difference between chorus and chorus. Sometimes I can hear a phasing effect in there, but it depends on which notes I'm playing. So I would experiment with that, and actually when you're making a sound, you would just try, chorus, phaser, if you were just experimenting, obviously. But I'll play chorus for you now, and we can compare it. So this is chorus. You can see the wave shape. Let me get rid of this quad. So here's chorus with defaults, and then if I select chorus, not much of a difference. But what I have noticed is if I increase feedback with chorus, it's a different sound than feedback with chorus. And sounds more phaser-like. So that's it for an exploration of the chorus and phaser effects. I'll see you in the next video.